At 7:43 a.m., they took his keys. At 7:44, the CEO's son forgot how to breathe. Rain marked the yellow hood of the school bus, while the yard clock clicked to 7:43. The supervisor held out a hand, without looking at Miguel Ortiz. The key ring left Miguel's palm and disappeared into a pocket like a receipt. Drivers he had trained passed with the careful aim of people avoiding a face they used to greet. Clipboard. Door shut. Routine continued, minus the man who built it. Beyond the fence, the Ellison SUV idled. Theo Ellison, 8, sat in back with both hands flat on his knees, eyes fixed on the door that used to open for him. Grant Ellison, the CEO, checked his watch, then his son, then the slow line of cars. Sloan Mercer, chief of staff and PR advisor, leaned across the console, speaking in even syllables. Grant nodded. The boy didn't blink. Miguel raised 4 fingers at waist height. A quiet signal. Count with me. Theo lifted his own. The yard gate rolled shut. Metal struck post. The substitute pulled Miguel's bus out with the stiff caution of someone wearing another man's jacket. 7:44. Theo's chest tightened. Thin inhale. No easy air after that. Miguel stepped toward the fence. The guard brought up a flat palm in the air boundary only. Miguel stopped. Children were not lines on a map, but lines had been drawn. Back inside, Ortiz, the supervisor said. Voice like the paper in last night's envelope. You've been notified. He stood under the awning. Rain dark on his jacket. Injustice wasn't announced. It lived in angles, a substitute's chin tilting high, a young driver balling a fist in her pocket, a parent turning a half smile off mid-face. In this small town, people usually nod in the morning. Not today. The bus rolled past the SUV. Theo followed it with his eyes, tapped his chest twice, tried to match the rhythm that used to steady him by the first stop. 4 in, 4 out. A small pause, again. Horns pressed. The moment slipped. Across the street, Mrs. Keegan, crossing guard, stood with a slim notepad under her sleeve. She saw Sloan fasten her coat the instant Miguel entered her sightline. The new driver pretended to study mirrors to avoid looking through the fence. Grant crouched low to speak to his son, then stand because traffic insisted. Details did the talking. If anyone watching knows what it's like to be pushed to the edge of the place you kept running, and still keep your voice steady so a child can get through a morning, share what helped in the comments. A simple line from someone who has lived it can make the next hour easier for another family. The suspension notice had arrived the night before. Boundaries. Review. Temporary. Clean words that turned a useful habit into a risk. Miguel wasn't at the board lunch where Hale, Drummond, and Pike pressed Grant about optics, custody, and a boarding school slot. He knew enough from hallway voices and the speed of the decision that set a substitute in his seat. When Miguel first met Theo, the boy stood 3 steps from the bus door, shoes planted on the crack between 2 slabs, eyes down. Day 1. Miguel stamped a small yellow pass. Day 1. Brave and let him choose any seat, today and tomorrow. The tin with the stamp lived above the wheel well. Theo watched it sit in the same spot every morning and nodded like that steadiness mattered. It did. This morning, the tin stayed where Miguel left it, but the door it belonged to opened for someone else. Forgetting a name happened fast. A form signed, a practice tilt of the head, steps angled away. As if Miguel hadn't shown a boy how to shape panic with 4 quiet counts. As if he hadn't kept a corner soft so no one startled into trouble. As if a school bus couldn't be mentorship. Grant walked Theo into school. Miss Rao waited at the doorway with attention instead of noise. Sloan passed dry. Someone held the umbrella at the exact height. She glanced at the fence like a storage shed and didn't look at Miguel. It takes practice to miss a person at 6 feet. She had practice. Miguel moved to the public sidewalk beyond the district line. He didn't push the fence. He stood where the morning could see him. A father dipped his chin. A mother brushed his hand and whispered, "We know," then moved on quickly because a town with the company name on the parade banner teaches caution about public sympathy. By noon, a polished local account posted a tilted, blurry frame, Miguel's shoulder bent near a child on a bench. Caption: his name with a question mark and a word that stains even when deleted. It spread faster than corrections. People argued about a picture instead of a boy's breath. Miss Rao called. She'd logged the morning in plain lines and stored it. No adjectives. Miguel had completed his own report and kept a copy. Times. Weather. What the child did with his hands when the bus didn't arrive the same way. Not to persuade anyone. To hold to what happened when language starts to drift. Dismissal sounded like a building breathing out. A too big backpack dragged, then was hauled higher. A girl waved at a friend in a car like they hadn't seen each other in hours. The day continued. A sedan, not the SUV, pulled up. Sloane sat behind the wheel, a crest on a folder angled to catch light. She didn't hide it. Grant stood curbside. Theo came out quick, scanning for one thing he had decided to find. In his hand, a yellow pass worn at the corners, stamp smudged. Day 12. Brave. He lifted 4 fingers. At the curb, Miguel matched him. Same tempo, no words. Mrs. Keegan checked the wall clock, wrote 3:18, and slipped the notepad back into her sleeve. Grant paused, 1 beat longer than needed. Sloane tapped the wheel and watched the lane toward the highway, the one that leads to gates and crests, and a brand of certainty people buy when they're scared. The car merged. The diner changed its board. The yard cooled to a soft tick. Rows sat where they belonged, one space unfilled, a small absence where a keyring used to warm metal. The count lived in Miguel's hands, whether or not anyone saw it. Somewhere, a father was measuring applause against presence. Morning returned with plain light. The guard nodded once, then looked away, a courtesy that didn't make a scene. The substitute parked straighter. Parents scanned for anything unusual. A few kids looked at Miguel, the way children look when the picture in their heads and the world in front of them don't match. He kept his hands in his pockets. A mother stopped at the line. "My daughter used to be sick on Mondays," she said, voice low. "She isn't anymore." "That's her work," Miguel said. "You did it with her," she answered, and stepped back before anyone could attach her words to her face. If steady stories like this are the kind you want close, where a small town, a bus route, and quiet choices matter, keep this channel on your list, so new pieces reach you without searching. It helps the people who show up know they're not standing there alone. Near noon, the district widened the boundary again. A laminated map turned more sidewalk red. No speeches, no debate. Just a guard with careful eyes and a sentence he didn't write. Miguel stepped back 2 squares and stood by the hydrant. From there, he couldn't see the door. He could hear the bell. At 3:18, Theo raised 4 fingers near his leg and lowered them. A small reset before the ride. Miguel, at the corner beyond the last red line, matched the count once. No one announced anything. The sedan turned toward the highway. Chairs were already set for a town hall next week. A folder with a boarding school crest sat on a passenger seat like a plan. The light changed. Traffic moved. People kept going, and several of them were still watching even after they looked away. He wasn't allowed to drive, so he stood where the morning could see him. Miguel Ortiz kept to the public sidewalk beyond the district line, jacket zipped, hands still. The guard at the gate clocked him once and looked away. No scene. At 7:05, minivans rounded the corner. Parents glanced at Miguel, then at the fence. A few nodded without showing teeth. One mother slid a coffee into his hand and kept walking. Kindness came with caution when a board was watching. Across the crosswalk, Mrs. Keegan noted the weather and traffic in her small book. No opinions. She watched a nervous kindergartner grip a sleeve until the sleeve relaxed. She watched Miguel not wave, not signal, just anchor the edge of the block like a habit that refuses to vanish. The Ellison SUV rolled up. Grant Ellison stepped out in a rumpled coat. Theo looked through the glass for the door that used to open. Sloan Mercer scrolled a schedule and spoke in low, clipped lines. Miguel lifted 4 fingers at his thigh. Theo matched him 1, 2, 3, 4, and his shoulders settled enough to cross when Mrs. Keegan raised her palm. Inside, Miss Rao met the boy at the entry with a quiet, "Good morning." She logged a single line. 4 count before door. Arrival calm. She stored it and moved on. A local reporter tried a soft approach at the curb. "Parents want context," she said. Miguel answered evenly. "A child wants a normal start. Film the sign, not his face." She nodded and filmed the sign. At 9:02, phones buzzed. A district notice widened the red zone. No presence within school perimeter during review, including sidewalks to the corner. The guard walked over with the laminated map. He didn't posture. Miguel stepped back 2 squares, past the new chalk, and stood by the hydrant. From there he couldn't see the door. He could hear the bell. By late morning on Wednesday, the elementary ran a fire drill. The alarm was blunt. Theo flinched, counted once, then lost the thread in the noise of moving feet. "Miss." Rao set her palm near his shoulder. Matched a breath without turning it into a lesson. He followed his class outside. Later she wrote, "Drill. Initial distress. Recovered with support. Asked for Mr. Ortiz. By name. No adjectives. Downtown. Earlier in the week on Tuesday, Sloan met Hale and Drummond at a quiet restaurant. Pike arrived with a thin agenda. Placement window is narrow," she said. "We make it, or we wait a year." They discussed investors, custody pressure, optics. No final date was set that day. At lunchtime that Tuesday, a clerk slid a box across the bus yard counter. Locker clearance. Policy. Eyes down. Miguel cleaned out his metal door. Spare jacket. Route maps with scribbled corners. The tin for the day X. Brave stamp. And a jar he'd forgotten paper slips kids had folded and dropped in with quick hands. Didn't cry. Sat with Maya. No yelling. Said hello first. He didn't count them. He placed the jar in the box and signed the form. It was an initial clearance. Formal inventory would follow. By 2 that afternoon, the polished rumor account posted the blurred bench photo again with a new caption that used his full name and a word that stains, even when deleted. The town split. Solid support, thin suspicion, quick jokes, longer anger. People argued about a picture instead of a boy's breath. That evening, Grant sat with Sloan at the kitchen table. Dinner plates to the side. The crest folder open. "He needs structure with peers who can match him," Sloan said. "Mentorship on campus. Trained staff. He has mentorship," Grant said. "It's on a bus, from a suspended driver restricted by the district," she said. "We cannot build on that." Grant looked toward the hallway where Theo's drawings were stacked. Doors, stop signs, a yellow rectangle with rows, a hand showing 4. He put the top page back where he found it. Morning came colder. Miguel kept to the new line by the hydrant. Mrs. Keegan wrote, "No yard presence. Parent questions rising." A first-grade teacher stopped with a careful step. "My class is easier when the ride is calm," she said. "That's good teaching and good driving," Miguel said. She smiled once and left. At 11, the district posted a town hall time. Thursday, 6 p.m. Chairs sat. Mic checked. Rules printed. Statements. Questions. Respectful tone. In chats, parents circled the hour. Some prepared notes. Some prepared faces. Sloane forwarded the notice to Grant with a line. We should be in Newford by then. Newford was the town by Hartwell. She attached, placement interview, 5 p.m. The overlap wasn't an accident. Grant texted back. Theo will have had a full day. It helps, she wrote. Less resistance. He didn't answer. At pickup, the substitute braked late at the big corner, then too hard at the line. 2 kids jolted and tried not to make a sound. Theo came out slow, sketchbook under his arm, the yellow pass worn at the edges in his fist. He raised 4 fingers near his leg. Miguel, at the far corner, answered once. Mrs. Keegan glanced at the wall clock and wrote 3:18. A man in a blazer walked down the sidewalk, pointing at concrete. You can't be here. I'm past the line, Miguel said. Parents are uncomfortable. Some are, Miguel said. The man's jaw shifted. Respect the process. I am, Miguel said. The sedan merged toward the highway that leads to gates and crests. Sloane watched the clock. Grant watched the light. The town did what towns do at 5 o'clock. Lined up at the diner, picked up dry cleaning, changed shoes. In the apartment above the hardware store, Miguel set the jar of slips on his table, opened it, read 5 notes at random, closed it, and put it back. He set the stamp tin beside it and left the lid shut. The count was in his hands. Tomorrow, he would stand where the map said he could stand. No wave. No call. Just there. When a boy looked up to check if steadiness still existed, the week tightened. The district map pushed the red line farther, and people adjusted their steps as if the concrete had changed shape. Miguel Ortiz kept to the corner past the hydrant. He didn't wave. He didn't call out. He was a fixed point at the edge of the morning. A new post from the polished local account went up before homeroom. It recycled the blurred bench photo with a sharper edit, and a caption that used his full name next to a word that stains even when deleted. Comments stacked fast: agreement, attack, defense, jokes, then more attack. In a small town, that tempo is its own weather. At 10, a guidance note slid into inboxes. Town hall confirmed for Thursday, 6 p.m., format and rules attached. Chairs would be set, names would be recorded, time limits would hold. Miss Rao read the note and went back to students. She wrote 2 brief lines after a classroom transition. Increased restlessness, first period. Settled by mid-morning. Theo asked if bus stamp tin will be back. She stored it. Downtown, on Thursday afternoon, Sloane Mercer met Hale, Drummond, and Pike at a quiet restaurant that kept meetings discreet. A folder with a boarding school crest sat at the center like a paper anchor. The placement window is open now, Sloane said. We lose it if we wait. Hale nodded. Investors want clean optics by quarter's end. Drummond didn't soften it. He's a CEO. He can't look undecided over a driver. Pike tapped his list. Custody pressure from the late wife's parents increases with every rumor cycle. Hartwell settles them. Sloane kept her voice level. Interview is booked. Thursday at 5. Tour at 5:30. We can be on the highway by 6:15. Before the town meeting, Hale said, satisfied, back at the bus yard. 2 days after the initial clearance, a clerk slid a form across the counter. Final locker check. Policy. Inside Miguel's metal door, a spare jacket, scuffed route maps, the small tin he'd used to stamp Day X, Brave, and a glass jar of paper slips kids had dropped in with quick hands over months. He placed the jacket and maps in a box. He held the jar long enough to feel the weight of didn't cry, sat with Maya, no yelling, said hello first. He didn't read them. He set the jar in the box and signed the checkout line. At school the next day, another fire drill hit with a long, even alarm. Theo Ellison, startled, counted 1 cycle, then lost the thread in the shuffle of shoes and voices. Miss Rao matched a breath near his shoulder without turning it into a lesson. He steadied by the door and followed his class outside. Afterward, she logged. Drill. Initial distress. Recovered. Asked for Mr. Ortiz by name. No adjectives. By lunch, the rumor account posted again. Tonight, accountability. No details. Enough to draw people who want a verdict before facts. The district reposted the town hall rules. The custodian checked the microphone, placed fresh batteries, and left the stage clear. At pickup, the substitute braked late at the big corner and corrected. 2 fourth graders jolted and glanced around, trying not to be the first to speak. A 7th grader started to stand in the aisle and sat back down when the roll continued. None of it made a headline. It landed on teachers in first period the next day. The Ellison sedan arrived. Grant watched the door. Sloan watched the clock. Theo came out with his sketchbook under his arm and the yellow pass in his fist, edges worn. He lifted 4 fingers low at his thigh. From the far corner beyond the last red chalk, Miguel matched the count once. Mrs. Keegan glanced at the wall clock and wrote 3. 18 inches her small book. She didn't write opinions. That evening, at the Ellison kitchen table, dinner plates slid aside. Sloan angled the crest folder into the center of the light. He needs structure with peers who can match him, she said. On-site mentorship, predictable routines. Hartwell is designed for this. He has mentorship, Grant said. On a bus, from a suspended driver restricted by the district, she replied. We cannot build a plan on access that can be revoked by a memo. Grant looked toward the hallway. On the floor, Theo had stacked drawings, doors, stop signs, a yellow rectangle with rows, a hand raised with 4 fingers. Grant placed the top page back exactly where it had been. My in-laws called again, he said. They're using custody like a lever. They send me the posts before I see them. They want to move. Then move, Sloan said. Show them leadership. You choose Hartwell. The board sees stability. The rumor cycle cools. He didn't answer. He signed a field trip form from school, set it aside, and read the town hall notice again. 2 lines on his calendar aimed at the same hour. He closed the calendar without deleting either. Thursday came sharp and clear. The guard at the gate nodded to no one in particular. The substitute parked straighter. Parents lined the curb, with questions held behind small smiles. Miss Rao agreed to speak for 3 minutes at the meeting, and no more. She kept her notes factual. Times, behaviors, what settled, what didn't. At noon, Pike stood by the sidewalk with Sloan and reviewed the schedule. Leave at 4, placement at 5, tour at 5:30, packet at 5:45, highway by 6:15. On time, Sloan said. Town hall starts at 6, Pike noted. Grant will send a statement, Sloan said. We won't be there to make it a scene. At 2:40, Theo sat on the low wall by the entry and drew squares with small marks inside each. 1, 2, 3, 4. He wrote start at the top in uneven letters. He tore the page out carefully and slid it behind the yellow pass. By 3:10, a parent in a blazer walked the sidewalk toward Miguel and pointed at the concrete. You can't be here. I'm past the line, Miguel said. Parents are uncomfortable. Some are, Miguel answered. The man's jaw moved. Respect the process. I am, Miguel said. He didn't move closer. He didn't move away. Dismissal released the day in a soft surge. Theo came out holding his backpack straps and the sketchbook. He scanned the curb fast, then steady. He raised 4 fingers once. From the far corner, Miguel matched the count, the motion small and exact. Mrs. Keegan lifted her palm. Traffic stopped cleanly. Then she lowered it. Sloan started the sedan. The crest folder sat on the passenger seat, ready. Grant opened the back door for Theo, set the sketchbook on the seat, and checked the time. 2 routes waited: the highway toward gates and a prepared tour, and the short turn toward folding chairs, where names would be said out loud. He looked at the clock, then at the boy, then at the road. The light changed. The sedan rolled forward into traffic that had already decided which way it was going. Morning arrived, clear and cold. The Ellison sedan sat in the driveway with a small suitcase in the trunk and a folder with a boarding school crest on the passenger seat. Sloan Mercer checked the time blocks. Placement at 5, tour at 5:30, packet at 5:45. Grant Ellison helped Theo zip a jacket and set the boy's sketchbook on top of the bag. "Traffic is light," Sloan said. "We'll be early." Grant locked the door behind them. He didn't answer. At school drop-off, Miss Rao kept her routine steady. "Good morning, Theo." He nodded and touched the yellow pass in his pocket. The day moved forward in small, necessary steps. Attendance, reading. Lunch. No announcements. No speeches. Teachers did their work. At 3:05, Grant parked near the curb. Theo came out holding the sketchbook and the pass. He didn't look at the highway. He looked for the corner beyond the last red chalk mark. Miguel Ortiz stood there, hands still, not waving. Mrs. Keegan lifted her palm. Cars paused cleanly. Theo raised 4 fingers low. From the corner, Miguel matched the count once, shoulders level. Theo got in the car. "Newford," Sloan said, fastening her belt. "Go right." Grant pulled into the lane. The sedan headed toward the main road, past the diner, past the laundromat, past the bus yard fence, where a key ring used to hang from a familiar hand. The light at River and Main turned red. Cars stacked. A delivery truck stalled in the middle lane. Horns rose and fell. The line locked beside the old stop. Theo's breath shortened. He pressed the pass against his chest and looked straight ahead. No one in the car spoke. Sloan watched the clock. Grant checked the truck, the cross traffic, the distance to the turn. He didn't move the wheel. On the far sidewalk, Mrs. Keegan looked up from her notepad and scanned the intersection. She lifted 2 fingers, a quiet signal used with drivers who know her. Across the street, a figure stepped to the edge and stayed there, jacket zipped, posture neutral. Miguel didn't lift an arm. He didn't cross. He held still where the map said he could stand. Theo saw him. He raised his hand and counted. 1, 2, 3, 4. No sound. Miguel matched him small, exact. Once more. 4 in, 4 out. The boy's shoulders settled. The horn line softened. "Right," Sloan said, not looking up. "We can still make it." Grant signaled left. "Grant," she said. He turned the wheel left through a gap that opened between the truck and the curb. The sedan cleared the intersection and took the short road back toward town. Sloan held the folder tighter and shifted it on her lap. "Statement." "We send a statement," she said. "We'll be in the room," he said. At 4:10, the sedan pulled into the lot behind the community center. Folding chairs were set in rows. A sign-up sheet rested on a table by the door. The custodian checked the microphone once and left it on the stand. Parents came in pairs and small groups, quiet talk under the hum. A few looked up at Grant. Most looked at Theo, and then looked away to give him space. Sloan stood by the wall with her arms folded and the crest folder tucked under her elbow. Miss Rao arrived with a thin notebook. Mrs. Keegan signed her name and sat near the aisle. Hale, Drummond, and Pike entered together and took seats along the side, phones face down. Miguel did not come in. He stood outside near the back door, away from the camera line, hands in his pockets, eyes on nothing in particular. Grant crouched by Theo's chair. "You okay to sit a bit?" Theo nodded and slid the sketchbook onto his lap. The yellow pass sat under his fingers. The room filled. The clock reached 6. A district staffer read the format. Statements, questions, time limits, respectful tone. No one clapped. No one booed. People waited their turn. Sloane leaned toward Grant. "We can leave after your statement," she said. Grant didn't answer. He watched the door where a latecomer slipped in and took the last chair along the back. He watched Miss Rao open her notebook to the page with today's date. He watched Theo trace a small square on his sketchbook, then stop. The staffer called the first name on the list. A parent spoke about mornings and routes and why steady drivers matter. Another spoke about policy and safety and the need for clear lines. A third said her daughter stopped getting sick on Mondays. The mic moved. The clock moved. The room held. The staffer called Miss Rao. She read times and observations from her notebook. Arrival calm with 4 count. Fire drill. Initial distress. Recovered with support. Asked for Mr. Ortiz by name. She closed the book and Saturday. A hand went up in the back. The mic traveled. The district kept time. The room stayed level. Outside, Miguel listened to muffled voices through the door and watched the sky ease toward evening. He didn't step closer. He didn't leave. Grant looked at Theo, then at the mic, then at the clock. He had made a choice at the intersection without saying the word. The rest of it was here, in the chairs, in the notes, in the quiet way. A town decides what belongs in the morning. Folding chairs filled in rows. A sign-up sheet sat on a table by the door. The district staffer read the ground rules, statements, questions, time limits, respectful tone. No one clapped. No one booed. It was a small town room doing a formal thing. Grant Ellison sat with Theo in the 3rd row. Sloane Mercer stood along the wall, the boarding school folder tucked under her elbow. Hale, Drummond, and Pike took seats on the side, phones face down. Miss Rao held a thin notebook. Mrs. Keegan folded her notepad and waited by the aisle. Miguel Ortiz stayed outside near the back door, beyond the camera line, hands in his pockets. First to the mic, a mother with a steady voice. "My daughter threw up most Mondays. She stopped after the route slowed at the big corner, and the driver talked her through the first 5 minutes. That matters." A man followed. "Policy exists for a reason. If the district says, 'Step back,' he steps back." He nodded toward the staff table. "We keep order." A teacher spoke quickly. "The morning set carries through first period. We feel it when the ride is rough." The district staffer kept time and moved the list along. Sloane stepped up with the crest folder. "Structure solves escalation. A placement like Hartwell gives Theo peers, trained support, on-site mentorship. This removes dependence on a single employee and protects the company's image. It is appropriate for a family with this level of attention." She held the mic lower when she said image, but the word carried. Murmurs, no outbursts. People wrote notes. The staffer called Miss Rao. She opened her notebook. Short factual log. She read without heat. Arrival calm when 4 count used before the door. Fire drill. Initial distress. Recovered with support. Asked for Mr. Ortiz by name. Dismissal. Raised 4 fingers. Reset before car ride. No incidents in class on those days. She closed the book. "That's all." A father in a work jacket spoke next. "I don't know the driver well. I know my kid comes home different when mornings are steady. If you need rules, write them. But don't break what works while you write." Hale took the mic. "The board is responsible for stability. The CEO cannot appear to lean on an individual hourly worker for family outcomes. We need an institutional plan." Drummond added, "Optics matter to markets. Hartwell resolves that." Pike said, "We respect staff. We also respect process. The district has acted. Let it work. The staffer looked to Mrs. Keegan. She stood with her closed notepad in both hands. Dates and times, she said. That's what I keep. She did not open the book. She recited. Monday last week. 3:18 boy raised 4 fingers. Driver answered from the corner. Calm departure. Yesterday. 7:44 breathing trouble at the curb. Steadied with count. She shifted her weight. I don't write opinions. I watch cars, kids, and who shows up. That's my job. Silence held. Then a parent asked for the rumor photo to be addressed. The staffer said the district doesn't litigate social posts. A hand rose from the press row. The reporter stayed seated and kept her mic down. A man in a blazer stepped forward. Anonymous complaints exist for a reason. People fear retaliation. The staffer glanced at legal counsel, then back to the room. We will accept written statements with names. Anonymous submissions will not be read here. Another parent spoke into the change. If you put your name on it, you mean it. If you won't, it's weather. The staffer called Grant. He stood without papers. He didn't touch the crest folder. My son needs quiet at the start, he said. When certain adults do ordinary work with care, he gets it. He looked at Sloan, then at the board side, then back to the room. We will follow procedure. We will respect rules. And we will not break what works while we do it. He returned to his seat. No applause. A few people exhaled. The mic moved. A teacher offered a 2-sentence note about the big corner and why it mattered. A para said dismissal felt safer when drivers didn't brake late. A grandmother said the bus driver once tied a shoelace without making her grandson feel small. Short lines, plain lines. The staffer checked the list. One more, she said. A small hand went up from the third row. Theo stood on the seat so the mic could reach, sketchbook on his arm, yellow pass in his fist. He looked at the staffer, then at his father, then at the room. When he counts, I can breathe, he said. He held up the pass. Day 12. It worked. He didn't cry. He didn't explain. He stepped down and sat, the card still in his hand. The room went quiet in a way that wasn't performance. Sloan held the folder tighter, but did not move. Hale looked at the side wall. Drummond adjusted his cuff. Pike made a quick note and put his pen away. The staffer looked at the list one last time. Thank you, she said, and set the clipboard down. She didn't offer a summary. The district council stood, gathered papers, and left by the side door. People stayed seated for a moment longer than usual at the end of a meeting. Outside, Miguel shifted his weight once and stayed where he was. Inside, Miss Rao closed her notebook. Mrs. Keegan reopened her notepad and wrote a single line. Boy spoke. Card shown. She underlined the time. The mic rested on the table, light still on, as faces turned toward the third row and then toward Grant, who didn't look at the clock or the door. He looked at the boy, at the card, and at the aisle between them. The room held still after Theo's words. The microphone light stayed on. Grant Ellison stood again without papers. No move tonight, he said. We're not driving to Newford. We'll be here. A few chairs shifted. No applause. Sloan Mercer tightened her hold on the boarding school folder. Grant looked at the staff table. I withdraw support for the suspension. If there are accusations, put names on them. Anonymous claims won't decide my son's mornings. Hale leaned to Drummond. Pike watched the floor. We follow process, the staffer said carefully. A review is active. Then add this to it, Grant said. My statement is public. My priority is student well-being. Write that down. He turned to Miss Rao. You've kept clean notes. Thank you. She nodded once. You're welcome. Sloan stepped to the aisle. Grant, the placement. Not tonight, he said. You're a CEO, she said, low and crisp. You cannot let a room like this set your plan. A room like this is where my son lives, he said. He needs calm at the start. We protect it. Sloane's jaw set. She did not argue into the mic. She stepped back to the wall. Phone face down on the folder. Grant faced the room again. The driver is outside because he respected your boundaries. He was asked to step back. He did. My son still looked for him. He paused. I intend to fund a formal morning role that doesn't depend on goodwill alone. Title simple. Scope simple. Keep the route steady. Protect the first 10 minutes. I'll work with the district tomorrow. He did not promise details he couldn't sign on the spot. He set the frame and stopped. The staffer marked a line on her pad. Noted. Mrs. Keegan raised her hand. A name on a proposal is better than a rumor, she said. Thank you. The district council stood. We'll contact parties in the morning. People began to rise in small waves. No one rushed the aisle. Miss Rao closed her notebook and offered Theo a small nod as she passed. Hale checked his watch. Drummond sent 2 short messages and slid the phone away. Pike followed them out with a neutral face. Grant touched Theo's shoulder. Come. They slipped through the side door into the cool air. Miguel Ortiz stood a few feet away, hands in his pockets, eyes on the ground between them. Grant didn't circle. I'm sorry, he said, for what I allowed when I stayed quiet. Miguel nodded once. I kept to the line. I saw, Grant said. Tomorrow I'll ask the district to restore access while the review runs. I'll sponsor a role so this isn't personal charity. Keep the route if they allow it. I want the morning you built. Miguel kept his voice even. The morning belongs to the kids. Good, Grant said. He looked at Theo. Show him what you drew. Theo opened the sketchbook. Squares in a row, each with 4 small marks. The word at the top, start. He handed over the yellow pass. The corners were soft. The stamp read Day 12. Brave. Miguel didn't take the card. You keep it, he said. You did the work. Theo closed his hand around the pass. Sloane came out through the main doors, kept to the side, and stopped when she saw them. She lifted the folder once as if testing the weight, then lowered it. Will you issue a statement? She asked Grant. Yes, he said. It will say we're building the morning we need. Here. She pressed her lips together. The board will call. I'll answer, he said. She gave a short nod. I'm going home. Grant didn't argue or ask her to stay. She walked to the sedan and left without spinning tires. The last parents filed out. Mrs. Keegan paused by the door and tipped 2 fingers. 6:15 tomorrow, she said. You'll be where you should be? Miguel glanced at Grant. Grant answered. He will. Miguel looked at Theo. See you at the crosswalk. Theo nodded and tucked the pass into his pocket. They didn't hug. They didn't stage a moment. They chose where to stand in the morning and left it at that while the building cooled and a custodian stacked chairs in steady rows without looking for who won or lost anything. 6 months later, mornings held a cleaner shape. The district posted a short note on the website. Role established. Student support. Morning transition. No photo. No slogan. Miguel Ortiz wore the same jacket he had always worn and still drove the school bus. His route was on the board by the dispatcher's desk in thick marker, as before. At 7:02, he parked straight, brakes smooth, door aligned with the crack in the sidewalk where kids like to line their toes. Mrs. Keegan lifted her palm. Traffic obeyed. Parents moved with the quiet purpose of people who had learned what helped. The red chalk lines on sidewalks had faded in the weather and were not repainted. The brave stamped tin sat in its tin spot above the wheel well. Miguel used it less. He didn't need to mark every day. He marked beginnings that mattered. Theo Ellison rode up front on Mondays, middle on Wednesdays, and, by his choice, in the back on Fridays. He still counted when he needed to. Often he didn't. He checked the mirror once, then looked down at his sketchbook and drew a doorway with a single square above it. He colored the square yellow. Miss Rao kept her notes the same way. She always had dates, times, facts. Her year-end line for Theo read, "Arrives settled, uses strategies independently, seeks help appropriately. Social connections increased." She stored it and moved on to a reading group. In the afternoons, the bus took the big corner evenly. 2 7th graders who once stood in the aisle now sat with younger riders on Buddy Fridays because Miguel asked them to. Not a program, not a campaign, just a seat chart that changed who watched the aisle. It worked. The polished rumor account that had posted the blurred bench image slowed down. A correction appeared 2 months back without fanfare. Earlier framing lacked context. Comments were fewer than before. People had found other arguments. Hale, Drummond, and Pike still attended events. Their updates used fewer words about optics and more about schedules. The company's quarterly call mentioned stability in 2 sentences and moved on. Grant spent less time in rooms with spotlights and more time in hallways at 7:50. He answered board calls when they came. He missed fewer drop-offs. Sloane moved to an apartment across town. She sent a brief message in the spring. "Hope Theo is well," Grant replied. "He is." There were no other lines. At the Crosswalk, Mrs. Keegan kept her book. She wrote less as the weeks went on because there was less to track. She still noted weather and times, and any car that rolled too far past the line. She still watched who shows up. The answer stayed the same. One Thursday, Theo climbed the steps, paused, and held out his yellow pass. The stamp read Day 60. Brave. The corners were worn thin. Miguel looked at the date. "Keep it or trade it for a new one?" he asked. "Keep it," Theo said, sliding it back into his pocket. He chose the middle seat and waved a first grader toward the front. "You can sit here today," he said without making it sound like a favor. Grant stood at the curb and watched the exchange. He didn't signal. He didn't speak. He let the door close and the bus pull away cleanly. He walked to his car and drove to the office with the kind of quiet inside that doesn't need to be explained to anyone. At dismissal, the building breathed out. The bus yard clicked with cooling engines. Miguel checked the mirrors, took the corner smoothly, and stopped at the light that used to be the hardest minute of the morning. It wasn't hard now. The light changed. They moved through it with the same steadiness they'd practiced for months. That evening, a simple envelope arrived at Miguel's apartment with the district seal. Inside, a 1-page renewal for his morning support role and a note handwritten in neat block letters. "Thank you for protecting the first 10 minutes. No gift card, no plaque. He folded the letter and placed it in the folder with his name on it. He kept a copy. On Friday, the route ran like it always did. Kids stood where they always stood. The count lived in hands that rarely needed it. The day didn't end with a speech or a headline. It ended with small things done right while no one clapped. The bus door opened and closed. The town kept its shape. A father measured presence over applause and kept choosing. A driver showed up again and again, the same way he did before anyone argued about him, the same way he would tomorrow. The morning held.